Kakadosh Boker Tov. We're continuing with the halachot of Sefirat Haomer. There's a very interesting stira that we have during these days. Mitzad echad, from one point of view, these are days of mourning. But from other point of view, these are days of simcha, and like what we already brought down in the name of the Ramban, Rabbeinu Bachiyai, that it's actually also Chol HaMoed. So exactly how do we put them both together? So it's actually very interesting that here, Hilchot Yosef actually brings down that there's a halacha that you're allowed to do what's called Hanukat Habayit, not only the limud, you're allowed to move into a new house during Sefirat Haomer, and you're allowed to renovate, right? You're allowed to do shiputzim all throughout the entire house as well, and you don't have to wait for Lamed Dalet Omer. You're allowed to do whatever you want with the house. So he asks the question, what's the difference? Why is it that all of a sudden, right, to do with, for example, during the 3 weeks, we know it's time of Avelout. Avelout, you're not supposed to do a lot of things. And here during Sefirat Haomer, it's going to be mutar. But mitzad sheni, we do know that in Sefirat Haomer there are things of Avelout. We leave our hair long, we don't have music, we don't have weddings. So obviously there has to be something here. So he says like this. He says, after understanding, he says the difference between the month of the Av, or whether it's going to be the Shavua Shechal Bo Tisha B'Av, the 9 days, the 3 weeks, and what we call Sefirat Haomer is that during this time we had of the 3 weeks, there was a destruction of the Bet HaMikdash and everything else that happened to Am Yisrael, and therefore it was already fixed that because of that we're going to have a time of Avelut. But he says mitzad sheni, the time of Sefirat Haomer was opposite. It was actually a good time. It was like Chol HaMoed as we always brought down. So therefore a person could actually reach very great heights during this time. So because of that, he comes and he says as follows. He says, now you cannot make Shechianu during Mena Mitzarim, right? But that means during the 3 weeks. But the Shulchan Aruch is talking about you're allowed to make a Shechianu during Sefirat Haomer, whether it's going to be on a new fruit or other things as well. So he says, so because of this, he comes and he says, so okay, you're going to come and you're going to be able to, we're going to say, let's say, go into a new house. You're allowed to put on even new clothing. The question that we mentioned already yesterday of Shechianu was a midat chasidut, that you wait for Shabbat or other things. But technically, mi'ikar adin, it's going to be mutar. So he says, so then why is it then that we don't do other things? He says, when it's going to be a simcha gedolah, for example, a wedding, or it's going to be, right, to rikudim mechulot of divrei of seudat reshut, there they were machmirim. There they didn't want, because of the students of Rabbi Akiva, so they set it aside as a time of Avelut. However, though, it's not a real time of Avelut like the 3 weeks. And because of that, he differentiates between whether it's going to be the music, that any time that it's going to be a Seudat mitzvah. So for example, then the next halacha, when he speaks about doing Hanukat Habayit, you're allowed to do Hanukat Habayit. He says that if you actually come and you're going to do the limud of the Hanukat Habayit, that's our minhag to do, so therefore it's even considered a Seudat mitzvah, and you can make Shechianu on a new fruit. However, though, he says even with that, you're still not supposed to listen to music unless you do a Siyum Masechet, and that's what we spoke about also on, if you remember, Pesach Sheni, that even though it was a Hilulav Rabbi Meir Balanes, we don't listen to music unless you do a Siyum Masechet. So he comes and he says, so that's what you're supposed to do. So now, actually understanding this, now we understand a little bit more about Sefirat Haomer, the difference between them, that whenever it's Seudat, that's why when it's Bri Milah, you're allowed to listen to music. When it's going to be a Siyum Masechet, when it's going to be a Pidyon HaBen, a Bar Mitzvah, Bo Bayom, all these things that it's not anymore a Seudat Reshut, now you're allowed to listen to music. Okay, so now the next halachot to do with Sefirat Haomer is, some people have a minhag of not going outside during Sefirat Haomer, right? Not traveling, not going around, just like they would do during the 3 weeks. He said, La halacha and lakpid is a klal, you don't have to be makpid whatsoever. The same halacha applies to swimming. So he says, we know that during the 3 weeks it's actually dangerous, whether it's going to be to swim in the sea and other things. Here he says that there's no problem whatsoever. He says, other than a place where they had a minhag to be machmir, so that's going to be something different. During the times of the Sefirat Haomer, right, from Shabbat to Shabbat, we have a minhag of reading Pirkei Avot. So there's different minhagim exactly when do they do it, whether they do it before the mincha, or we do it in the morning every single Shabbat. But there was a minhag of reading Pirkei Avot every single week, and then we finish it by the time it comes the Shabbat, the last Shabbat. The last halakha that I'll mention is actually very interesting. During Sefirat Haomer, you only say Tikun Leah and not Tikun Rachel. And he says that even during the days that you're going to, means in Tikun Hatztot, you're only doing a Tikun Leah. He says, and even during the days that you're going to do Vidui, right, you still don't do it. And in Tikun Leah, you're not going to say the Pasuk Adana Bichya Betzion in Tikun Leah. So he says that when you say Tikun Leah, you don't have to change your place or sit on the floor. So here he actually based it on the Acharonim, And he says that the reason why is, he says again, it's like kimat yamim tovim. Now again, this is how we mentioned in the beginning of the shiur, that it sounds like a stira. From one point of view, you're telling me that it's a time of Avelut, and the other point of view, you're telling me it's like a Yom Tov, and the truth is, it's like both. We're taking both aspects of it, and therefore, to do with the Tikun Hatztot, you're not saying Tikun Rachel, you're only doing Tikun Leah. Anyway, in Eretz Yisrael, it's different this year, because since it's Shnat HaShemitah, anyway, they wouldn't be doing Tikun Rachel. But here in the diaspora, that you would do the Tikun Hatztot, the full Tikun Hatztot. Here, during Sefirat Haomer, you only say Tikun Leah, and not Tikun Rachel.